Hey guys, welcome to the Trans Lesson Plan, your go-to podcast for all of transgender history. I am your host, Mari, and if you don't already know who I am, please check out episode 0, which basically explains who I am and your host, who will be basically giving you new episodes every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't like to really go into myself too much because this podcast isn't about me, so I don't have to basically give out my credentials every time we host a podcast. So I definitely want to go ahead and get into today's topic, which I actually brought up briefly in the first episode that we hosted. And with that being said, I'd like to talk about this topic because I feel like you still can't really get into the actual history of the transgender community without bringing up the first group of individuals who basically introduced us to, gender variance, giving us the opportunity to express our genders in a variety of different ways. Was not introduced by white people. It was not introduced by black people. It was actually introduced by Native Americans and the indigenous cultures that surround themselves around, the Native American cultures as well. So, when we think about the Native Americans, we always, I won't say that we leave them out per se, but I will say that because we don't see much of them as we normally do, I think that we always put them on the back burner. And this is my opinion. This is not everybody's opinion, but this is my opinion. And in erasing a culture that introduced us to the ability to express ourselves in a variety of different ways, it's kind of effed up to me. I feel as though we can't discuss anything related to the LGBTQ plus community without acknowledging the impact that Native Americans have had on us and the ability to be able to express ourselves, this in today's society. So I want to go into how the Native American culture has influenced gender fluidity and how it honestly, introduced us to the LGBTQ plus, cultures. I mean, of course, even before Native Americans, really the LGBTQ plus cultures were introduced because we don't really know what happened in the ADs and BCs and CDs, and all the DDs that we have out there. We do know a little bit, right? We know that, they were cavemen and all these things. And honestly, we never lived that far back to know any of this information, but that's why we have historians here to be able to assist us, in trying to retain as much information as possible related to our culture. So I do like to point out that, like I said, I feel as though, although we don't know what happened, decades and decades ago, I do want to point out how the Native American culture has influenced gender fluidity. So how about we go ahead and get started within this? So I do want to start with the first topic, right? Now, a relatively fluid view of gender was one key cultural element that was mostly lost by European American contact. So a substantial number of Native American tribes accepted a gender role that differed from Euro-American gender stereotypes. And this gender role, commonly known as berdache, is a radical break from European American gender roles. Now, before I go ahead and continue, I want you guys to know that Europeans were not the first people to ever discover America. Christopher Columbus, I don't know why we have a day on this man, did not discover America first. What ended up happening, of course, is when Christopher Columbus came, they wiped out basically almost the entire nation of the Native American cultures and indigenous cultures, meaning that if they didn't kill them, they ended up taking them in as slaves and laborers and things like that. So Europeans first came around in 1492, right? So we have to think about how we were trying to erase, like I said, a culture that had so much influence on mostly a lot of things that we do today, especially related around gender. So to go ahead and continue, berdache were usually biological men, or less frequently women who adopted culturally defined features of the opposite gender. So European settlers and their American descendants, like most other Native American institutions that they misunderstood, worked tirelessly to abolish the berdache, right? And berdache almost frequently cross-dressed and took on occupational and spiritual roles associated with the opposite sex, though not always. So berdachism was found in at least 113 Native American tribes, indicating that the condition was widespread, while transvestism and transgenderism, The closest equivalents to Bradashism in mainstream American society are widely and stigmatized. The Bradash were traditionally well respected and accepted in tribal life. And as a result of that, Bradash were integrated into their tribe's mainstream familial, structures based on their acquired gender role, notwithstanding the need for biological accommodations. So, the Badash was notorious, for marrying a man or woman of the opposite gender, but of the same biological sex, right? I hope that makes sense. So the stigma linked to same-sex weddings in contemporary American society did not exist in Native American culture since homosexuality was not culturally prohibited as long as its participants were heterogeneous. So I hope, I hope that was clear. If I had to explain it, let me know and we can discuss that in the next episode at the beginning before I even get into it. But let's talk about this. So when a child is born with specific genitalia in Euro American culture, right? Normally he or she is assigned an official sex, right? That's man or woman, as well as a set of cultural behaviors related to work, temperament, attire, sexual activity that he or she is expected to adopt throughout life, right? AKA societal norms that we have that they try to base gender should be specifically based upon. If you're a man, you're supposed to be the breadwinner. You're supposed to, work hard, come home, relax, and do nothing. As women, we are supposed to be slaves to our husbands, right? We're supposed to cook, clean, do all the handiwork within the household. You're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to do anything, right? Gender roles, stereotypical gender roles, right? Of course, these expectations define the gender role of the child, whether he or she is male or female, as we all know. So, gender, of course, is determined in European American society because sex, uh, what's the word I'm trying to say, guys? Predetermines, my apologies, and is confused within it, right? So, gender in Native American cultures, though, on the other hand, is derived from a child's individual preferences and is often seen as transitive, right? Although biological sex generated a gender role presumption, this presumption was debunked. So if a child exhibited a tendency for behaviors and skills associated with the other gender, that proclivity would not be suppressed in Native American cultures, right? And he or she would be free to mature into the gender being best suited to his or her, well, technically, let me say or they, and of course, any other pronouns that's associated with this would be free to mature in what best fits their genuine abilities, right? So in Native American culture, the transitive identification of gender reflects numerous key contrasts between Euro American and Native American cultures. My apologies. So I want to kind of go into that entire paragraph that I just read off, right? As I said before, in gender, we as European American, well, I won't say we because I'm not European American, actually, I'm African American, but we as Americans as a whole, in my opinion, as a society, um, like I said, we predetermine our sex and we predetermine exactly whatever sex you get, you're supposed to play that gender role associated with that sex, right? Now let's think about it from, in the gender of Native American cultures back then. Whenever a child was born into this earth, they allowed their child to be able to, you know, take on those, well, I won't say take on, but explore those tendencies that they would have, regardless of their behaviors or their skills associated with any other gender, right? And allow them to be free to feel what, be free, my apologies, to express what they felt was best to them, right? In American cultures, we don't do that, right? Well, back then we don't do that, but now it's of course being more, prevalent. But if you think about back then, European Americans was trying to brainwash individuals, and that's not even Native Americans, of course, when they first came into this place. It was, African Americans as well with Christianity. So, I always like to point out that the Native Americans allowed their kids to be free. They allowed them to express themselves regardless of whatever behavior that they experience, whatever skills they associated, even if it was related to the other gender, because they felt as though they want their child to do what best fit them and what genuinely made them feel themselves. Right? We didn't do that back in the day, and we still obviously have people now who, of course, don't agree with the community that, so within the LGBTQ plus community. So we have to think about that, right? So let me go ahead and go on with the rest of this lesson, right? So first, parenting in Native American tribes highlight the child's autonomy rather than the parent's authority to dictate a child's development. Native American parents, especially among the Navajo, showed a strong respect for the child's autonomy and his or her own identity. So among the Navajo, the major goal of parenting is to encourage their children to explore their environment and develop a knowledge of their purpose in both their immediate family and, of course, the bigger world. So Navajo parents frequently lavish their children with praise while they go throughout their journey of self-discovery to convey the idea that they are loved and to develop a good feeling of self-worth. So rather, excuse me, than putting pressure on a child to conform to the family's expectations, the Navajo culture and other Native American families are known for accommodating the child even when he or she or them, they, does not develop according to their expectations. Now, guys, I didn't realize this, and me doing as much research as I do on the transgender community, I never knew that Native American tribes allowed their children to take on the opportunity of self discovery as much as they did, right? So, as I did a lot of research on this topic, when I first read that line in this paragraph, I thought that, why did we try to stray away from that, right? And it actually almost made me, shed a tear a little because it's just like, damn, like there are people out here who allowed their children back in the day to express themselves however they wanted. The Native American tribes and some of them, would allow their children to just, go ahead. We want you to develop who you are, develop your knowledge of purpose. And I don't want that to be a strain on you because we expect you to be a certain way. And if somebody hears that today from their family or friends, right, you will feel so much like, I don't even know what word I'm trying to use, but you will feel so much love from your family or your friends if somebody was to ever tell you that line that I just read, right? So let me read that line one more time. Navajo parents frequently lavish their children with praise while they go through their journey of self-discovery to convey the idea that they are loved and to develop a good feeling of self-worth. Damn. I wish I could hear. I wish that every child and adult too. I won't even say just child because some people don't, figure out some things early in life. But everybody who was in the transgender community and even within the LGBTQ plus community as well, I'm going to include everybody in this, could hear that line from their family and from their parents. Because if you were to think about back then, let's say for those who are listening and they didn't get acceptance from their family, right? Let's say you heard that, right? Let's say like I'm your parent, right? And I'm just like, hey, like I love you. Although you're young and I know that you're young, I want to praise you to be able to go out and discover who you truly are. I want you to understand that you are loved and that I want you to find your self-worth without you worrying about what the family expects from you because I love you as a parent that much and you're my child and I want you to know that we will never be the same. So I want you to know what your self-worth is and not what me as a parent or the family wants your self-worth to be. Like, just think about that. That is, wow. Definitely something I like to highlight and I definitely would like to always probably bring up at some point, throughout the rest of this because that's, that hits home right there. So let me go ahead and go on before I cry on this podcast. So the main necessary elements of gender fluidity were rapidly undermined as Native American tribes became penetrated with European American beliefs, threatening both the transitivity of Native American gender and the tribe's overall vitality. Native American gender beliefs were suppressed by a variety of forceful means during a period of European American colonization. So traditional Native American views about child autonomy, relative sexual equality and tribal group loyalty were profoundly modified as a result of these efforts. So Berdache were shunned and marginalized from the beginning of Euro American encounters with Native American gender diversity. So early Spanish colonial chronicles reflect strong condemnation of Native Somali, a behavior that is normally considered worthy of persecution in heavily Christian Europe, but which was unavoidably associated with a relationship between males and male body Berdache. Because of the Spanish considered homosexuality to be one of the most heinous sins against God, its widespread practice helped to justify the conquest of the Americas, which included the rape and the erasure of Native American villages. After gaining control of the former Spanish colonies in the West, the United States happily assumed the position of cultural repressor, embarking on a systematic mission to suppress stereotypical gender beliefs and disrupt associated cultural practices. Now, guys, like I said, we weren't the first people to ever be up on this earth. Well, technically, my apologies, not earth, but we weren't the first people to ever be on this United States of America land, right? So as we have these people come in and take over the Native American land and as well as basically erase them from America as a whole, not only did they try to, of course, erase homosexuality, but including rape and the erasure of Native American villages, the pillage of these villages. Like I said, being an educator and a researcher on this topic is, as I learn more about it and take time to learn more about it, of course, every time I have to come back to something like this, I always think about how people really took the time to not allow others to basically be great. Right? You have Native Americans that come on this land who basically owned this land before anybody else came up on here. People come in, colonize it, kill everybody, and basically says, let's erase all that because I don't like it. That's not our beliefs. And we're going to basically brainwash you to learn something new. And now you have to go ahead and teach those ways to the rest of your generations. That's why America could be as effed up as it is now, right? Anyways, so due to the government having absolute power in compulsory schooling, it had a considerably negative impact on the cultural traits that gave rise to a flexible and transitive notion of gender. Child autonomy, gender equality, and community aspirations were all influenced significantly. So without the traditional ability to create their own gender roles free of coercion, Native American children were brainwashed into Euro-American gender norms. I just talked about this, so I'm not about to go back into it. So the traditional conceptions of gender that were damaged throughout the period of Euro-American domination were reintroduced and preserved by Navajo courts using this interpretive direction. So Berdache was virtually destroyed as the component aspects of traditional Native American gender notions were weakened. So that means children lacked the opportunity to act on their natural tendencies to self-determine their gender identity, and gender role violations came with a new social shame and economic punishment with no recognized societal gain, right? So although the Navajo courts have not issued any ruling specific on, Berdashism, they have issued numerous rulings on the underlying cultural traits that allow for gender fluidity in traditional Native American civilizations. Regardless of any persistent hidden Berdache affiliation, the Berdache did not have the cultural esteem and respect they had had in the past by 1934. So following the fall of the government and, assimilation policy, Native American tribes were granted the chance to build separate legal institutions to preserve their cultural traditions and promote tribal identity despite the overwhelming influence of mainstream America. So the federal government granted tribes the right to create their own, governments and tribal judiciaries in the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. So that tradition led to the conceptions of gender that were damaged throughout the period of Euro-American dominations were able to be reintroduced and preserved by Navajo courts at the time. So, look at that, guys. We love to see it. I just like to put that out because I always have to go back and reread that because it's just crazy how we allowed that to kind of happen. You know what I'm saying? So moving on, so when dealing with situations involving parent-child relationships at this time, the Navajo courts addressed the challenges in ways that reflect traditional concepts of child autonomy and stray from the oppressive child rendering beliefs seen in American culture. So, now that we move past all of that, the Navajos believed that everyone had the right to speak for themselves and do as they wish, right? So while family and community responsibilities are crucial, a child's individuality should not be suffocated or made submissive to the expectations or desires of his or her parent or guardian. So at this time, children were not seen as property or possessions by Navajos, but they were actually seen as people in society. So the Navajo court shifted the tribe away from the American teachings of requiring children to cater to their family's expectations and toward the traditional concept that is the parents who must themselves cater to the particular needs of their child while he or she is determining his or her own identity by complying to the child's rights. Damn! I'm sorry, I actually had to cuss on that one, guys, because I want to reread this whole line to you guys. The Navajos believed that everyone has a right to speak for themselves and do as they wish. While family and community responsibilities are crucial, a child's individuality should not be suffocated or made submissive to the expectations or desires of his or her parent or guardian. Guys, the Navajos didn't see their children as property or possessions. They saw them as people in society. They allowed their children to be who they wanted. They allowed their children to cater to themselves, to determine their own identity. They said that the family's expectations had to cater to the needs of their children because it applied to the children's rights, because they saw children as people. I know this is a transgender educational podcast, people. I know that. But damn it, I'm gonna have to preach on this one. Because if we thought like this today, and some people do, I'm not gonna say everybody's parents don't think like this. Some people's parents do think like this. My mom and my family thinks like this. But if we allowed everybody to have the opportunity to see their children as people in society, to allow their children to determine their own identity, parents cater to their child's needs, I'm telling you, the world would be a better place. The world would be a better place because my mom, and I'm going to give my own personal example of this, because my mom saw me as another person in society. My mom saw that I wanted to figure out my own identity. My mom saw that she felt as though she needed to cater to the needs of me. This is what makes me so happy with myself right now. Yes, I don't have all, the surgeries and things like that yet, but because I got the support from my mom, my uncle, and the rest of my family, and I say my mom and my uncle first because they were the first people I ever came out to when it comes to my gender identity. Having the support of them makes me live my life so carefree. I won't say carefree, but it allows me, my apologies, to live so freely in society right now. I'm not afraid to tell people my gender identity. I'm not afraid to talk about my gender identity. I'm not afraid to talk about who I am, or I'm not scared to hide who I am today. If everybody thought like that, like, I'm telling you, the world would be a better place. For those of you who identify, of course, within the LGBTQ plus community, and you decide to have children, and if you already have kids, of course, I hope that's your mindset. I really do. Like, I want everybody to have that opportunity to allow their kids to do what they please, to be able to determine who they are. Children are people too. Like, we are people. Now I understand people be like, they're too young to understand these things. I don't think a child's ever too young to figure out who they are. I feel like kids know who they are from the jump. So if you cater to your child and their needs, man, it's just self-explanatory at this point. I don't even want to go more into it, honestly. But so the tribal court's dedication to sustaining traditional gender concepts is symbolized by this accommodation of a child's independent growth, which is an important approach to traditional gender transitivity. Oh man, I messed that last line up, but I hope you guys understood. So gender equality is the second required precursor for traditional gender variety, and the tribal courts have gone to tremendous pains to preserve it. Right, the Navajo tradition of gender equality has been openly recognized and used as a foundation for the court's decisions in various cases. And although the decision, in some of these instances would almost necessarily be the same in American courts, the Navajo courts have emphasized that the same outcomes are the result of quite different cultural discourses. So, furthermore, the Navajo courts have based their, judgments not just on philosophical gender equality, but also on the social economic benefits historically associated with the female gender, right? So, look, nonetheless, significant barriers remain in the way of a true reemergence of traditional gender diversity, in which the interaction of child autonomy, gender equality, and tribal communalism yields a flexible and transitive view of gender. Now, to go in, this is going to be a couple things I want to talk about. So it's going to be three different topics. So to begin with that, the economic challenges that most reservations face today make replicating the labor efficiency of old gender systems challenging, right? That's the first thing. So second, despite the court's efforts to restore women's traditional social status, Native American women have struggled to profit from equal legal standings, as domestic abuse and rape are particularly common in today's reservations. That's the second thing, right? So look, despite the fact that, tribal court decisions have altered gender formation in modern tribes for today, American culture continues to influence those tribal lives. Parents of younger generations have basically been unable to successfully transmit Navajo history and culture to their children because numerous generations of Native Americans have been isolated from tribal society due to American brainwashing. Like, I want to reread that because this talks about today's society, right? As we go ahead and close out on this lesson, today's society of Native Americans basically were brainwashed by the Americans back in the time where they were, where they were taken over by colonization, and it doesn't allow these kids to be able to embrace their original tradition. As I said, it says the parents of younger generations have been unable to successfully transmit the Navajo history and culture to their children because of isolation. So when Americans came, Euro Americans came and took over, of course. Not only were some people killed off, like I said, European Americans took some of these families and used them as slaves, put them in camps, just like back in the day of the Holocaust. It's some very similar to that. So a lot of these Native American tribes have been isolated from knowing their own history and culture, which doesn't allow them to express themselves how their ancestors did, you know, back in the day. So let me go ahead and continue as we finish up and wrap up this lesson. So, as indicated by their rejection of mainstream, LGBTQ plus terminology in favor of the term Two Spirit, today's gay and lesbian Native Americans have embraced the Bradash tradition, and this phrase encapsulates Native American homosexuality's distinct ancestry, which stems from Bradashism and the traditional identity combination of masculine and feminine spirits. So, individuals and families continue to this day to use the Bradash tradition to situate their struggle to accept homosexuality and the historical legacies of the Native American acceptance and endurance. The Bradash represented a gender identity that was foreign to and incapable with European American gender concepts. So, sex and gender were different and separable in Native American culture civilizations, and the child was allowed to explore the gender identity that was most closely matched to his or her intrinsic talents regardless of biological traits. So as I go ahead and wrap up, of course, unfortunately, the Bradash's extinction resulted in a comprehensive reorganization of Native American society, not just a cosmetic loss of one part of the Native American existence, but also individual self-determination was forbidden for children, and they were forced to conform to the rigid guidelines of their American enforcers. Now, I concluded with that because I want you guys to know that people do know about their history, especially in Native American culture. Yes, it has been brainwashed and tried to be, basically foreign to their own cultures. But because of that, a lot of Native American cultures and tribes right now that's still out there don't accept their children as they are. They don't allow their children to what their ancestors did back in the day, like I said, to be able to, self identify, allow their kids to explore, allow their children to be able to figure out who they are. So I want you guys to always think about this when it comes to the end of this lesson. And as I wrap up this podcast, always look back into your culture to figure out why some things are happening. Like I said, the Navajo cultures and tribes allowed their children to be able to explore themselves however they wished and whatever they feel comfortable. Until European Americans came, colonized, took over, basically brainwashed them into thinking that these things don't exist, or like you said, they're forbidden and they are, God's most horrible sin, that what used to be a tradition to the Native American culture has now become extinct. Absolutely fucked up, and I apologize for cursing again, but absolutely fucked up. But don't think that because now everything seems as though it didn't happen, quote unquote, back in the day, that you can't look into what you're doing now and continue to persevere through it. Because this entire lesson was based upon how Native Americans influenced gender fluidity. It talks about how families allowed their children to be able to express themselves. It talked about how generations of Native American tribes came in and allowed themselves to be able to express themselves in the opposite gender, whether that be male or female. These things here has made a revolution to the community today. So I hope today's lesson was worth every second of you guys listening. Of course, I want to give a huge shout out to the Native American cultures, tribes, and the indigenous cultures and tribes as well, because without you guys, we wouldn't know much about gender fluidity to this day and you guys' impact on that as well. So until next time, guys, I am your host, Mari. If you want to follow me on social media, my name is at mariiiwrld. That is MAR3ISWRLD. You can find me there. My website is going to be active today, and you can go there at www.amari, AMARI. My last name is McGee, MCGEE.com to learn more about upcoming events that I have, my practices of being a life coach and a transgender consultant as well, and much more. So until next time, guys, I appreciate you all for listening. And I will see you all next Sunday at 9 p.m. Peace.